Sansayoke, Kirby Redwood, lead Escapios at Miskanawah. I come from Kausas First Nation, Treaty 4, and Cree Soto. And I've called Mohkinstsis my home for over 50 years. In a creator's name, when I think about social inclusion, I think about Wakodoan. And I think about living in relationship, kinship. I'm reminded of what we often hear in the sweat lodges is when the doors are closed, there is no color. And building relatives, building relations, truth and reconciliation, those things can happen in isolation of others. And at Miskanawah, that's what we strive to do when living and modeling Wakodoan. And it's how it's directly tied to social inclusion. You know, our programs, our cultural offerings, our services, they're not static. We don't invite people into and prescribe a program. We invite them in. We invite them in and meet them on their own terms and in their own time and in their own way. And while they might come into a housing program, for example, it's not just a housing program. They don't go through the program, they're done, they're finished, and they move on. That's not Wakodoan. Wakodoan is about relationship. So when they come in, that might be their point of entry, is housing. And Miskanawah has many points of entry. We strive to create safety. We strive to build trust. And we know that whether it's feasting or sweat lodges or smudging or access to elders, whatever that might be, that's part of building relations. And the building relations and meeting them on their own terms, we don't know what the answer is to that. All we can do is invite and offer. And through our ceremonies, through our truthing ceremonies, we get a better sense of where they're at and what they're looking for. So when I think about social inclusion, when I think about diversity and equity, I think about Wakodoan and how we invite our families, how we invite our community partners, and how we build relatives. When I think about how Miskanawah leads with culture, how we try to create Indigenous parallels in our offerings today, you know, it's a difficult journey. It's a difficult ask because often we're trying to create these Indigenous parallels or lead with our Indigenous parallels without people understanding or recognizing their significance and their value. And so we're Escapios and lead Escapios in trying to create ethical space between the Indigenous worldviews and the Western worldviews. And often the entry point for an organization like Miskanawah in any sector is a Western one. And then we step into that Western parallel with our cultural understandings, our cultural worldviews, and try to create and introduce those parallels. But when you have funders that don't recognize them, then we're often creating those parallels on our own with other allies. But that's part of the building relatives and building relations strategy, we recognize that that's part of our responsibility as Escapios. So building relatives, building relations, you know, some evidence that you see in everyday experience or encounters at Miskanawah is the diversity of elders and knowledge keepers that we utilize. Last year we had over 70 different elders from multiple different nations come and be a part of some of our offerings. Some of them were there for, you know, once a year, twice a year. Some are there monthly, some are there weekly, and some are used daily. And so that speaks to that diversity and that journey in building relations and those Indigenous parallels about creating ethical space. At Miskanawah and at the heart of Wakodoan, from a community of care lens, it's grounded and rooted within our relationships. It's a relational process that we embrace with each other and within our families, within our community. And so at Aski Matsuin, out on the land where we create a lot of our Indigenous parallels, We strive to build cultural competency, cultural capacity through our relationships, through ceremonies, through transfer of knowledge. And so our escapios, we have many different escapios, and escapios translates to helper of elder, helper of ceremony. But a big part of escapio's responsibility is that transfer of knowledge when they're ready for it. But it's based on relationships. It's how people show up, and whether they're staff or families, they come into these circles and they have those opportunities. So when they come into our programs, again, it's not a static entry point. It's not a, you get a service, you're in and you're out. It's an entry point to that relationship with themselves, with Miskanawah, with community, with Creator, and with Mother Earth. And so that's our community of care. It comes from that perspective, that lens, where we're modeling and living Wokotowin. And we understand that Wokotowin too it resonates with many different people across Mother Earth. So there's many parallels of our Indigenous worldviews and teachings that are recognized and embraced by other cultures. And so when we invite, we're inviting everybody that's interested or curious about walking alongside Miskanawah and our cultural offerings. So when I think about person-centered service delivery, I think about our annual tea dance ceremony, which is a community engagement Western parallel. And in our tea dance ceremony, we set our intentions about what we hope to create, and we invite people to chime in. We invite them in ceremony. We invite them in to share their stories, their perspectives, their hopes and their views, and what we might create together. And so the tea dance ceremony, the annual tea dance ceremony, sets that tone for us throughout the year. It's like our compass, our guiding light. And so we revisit those stories that were shared during that time. And they're more than just stories, because they're in ceremony. They become part of our cultural mandate on how we protect the smudge. That's the how, is those stories that are shared in that ceremony. And then our truthing ceremonies that are now happening monthly, sometimes every couple of weeks. That's how we gauge our impact. That's how we fine-tune our strategy or our focus. That's our pulse. They give us a sense of where we're at in regards to meeting those goals. Sometimes we miss the target completely and we're quickly corrected. Other times we're able to celebrate the successes. We're able to celebrate the growth, the change, and the healing in real time. And I think that's really important. That strengthens our relationship, our resolve, and it strengthens, our ability to move forward collectively when we're able to hear in real time the impact we're having from those that we're serving, when we're hearing from their voices directly about what kind of impact we're having. It fuels not just the cultural mandate, the vision and mission of Miskanawah, but it strengthens our relations with each other, and it strengthens our relationship with Creator and Aski Matsuin. So no matter what program we offer, Aski Matsuin, the land is life, land is healing, plays a role and a function in that. Our elders remind us that our language, our teachings, our cultural understandings, our connections start and emanate from Mother Earth. And so it's so important for us to continue to strengthen and build our cultural offerings in that way out on the land. So in the Creator's name, Wokotowin, Cree natural law, living in relationship, kinship, is at the heart of how we choose to lead, how we choose to invite and offer. And that's our cultural mandate. Protecting the smudge, we invite and we offer. So the function and the practice of embracing the Escapios teachings has certainly grown significantly in Miskanawah, to the point that our relatives are growing, and our relatives are other service providers, other agencies, other funders, and that relationship is a perfect example of social inclusion, of equity and diversity, because our Indigenous families are often not just Indigenous. They come from many different backgrounds, and so it's important for Miskanawah to meet them where they're at. And the 70 different elders and knowledge keepers from diverse backgrounds are able to speak to that and address that. More and more we're finding, through our 4-day sacred fire, through our round dance, where we have over 4,000 people coming, we see how the building relative strategy has impacted not just Miskanawah and some of our close relatives, but many people within Mohkinstsis, within Calgary. And so building relatives has become a leading strategy in how we support our families and meet them where they're at, and recognize that Miskanawah isn't the answer to everything, but through our relationships with our elders and knowledge keepers, and with our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters, our non-Indigenous allies, we can find those answers. So when I think about building relatives and social inclusion, equity, and diversity, I think about that journey, how we walk alongside each other and explore what that means for each of us, and what that means for the children and families we serve. In the Creator's name, when I think about truth and reconciliation, I can't help but get emotional. And I also think about what some of our greatest allies and Indigenous leaders have continually grounded us and reminded us of. I think about the late Murray Sinclair, and how he led that journey of reconciliation in Canada. And in reading his book, he shares the stories of those many different families, and they're heavy and they hit hard. But what Murray reminds us of is that that's our truth. That's part of Canadian history that people need to understand. And if we're ever going to reconcile, if we're ever going to have some reconciliation outcomes that resonate with Canada's Indigenous people, then we need to walk alongside each other. We need to meet each other. We need to create that ethical space. But you can't create that ethical space if people don't hear each other, if people aren't listening, if there aren't those common understandings and teachings. So when we hear people say stuff like, well, when are you just going to get over it? When I hear that, I hear that somebody doesn't understand, that they don't know a part of that Canadian history that has been driving and influencing some of these challenges and some of the desired changes. And so how do you get over the loss of a child? You never get over that. You can't. How does a mother get over the loss of a child? How does a mother get over somebody coming into her home, into her community, and ripping the child away out of the mother's arms? That's something you can never get over. You just learn to live with it. You learn to heal from it. You learn to find some space to make sense of it, so that you can move forward and change it. Change our future so it doesn't happen again. And so when I think about reconciliation, I think about building relatives and how critical that is. And we can only build strong relations, strong connections if we're creating ethical space and acknowledging both worldviews. And For Miskanawah, it's about leading with our Indigenous worldviews. They're not add-ons, as they have historically been for us. We're starting to lead with our Indigenous worldviews, leading with Wakotowin, and we don't have all the answers. But what we do have is a strong contingent of Escapios that are committed to continuing to learn and to continue to lead. And we want to do that. We invite and we offer that to our non-Indigenous allies, to non-Indigenous agencies. Come sit with us. Come Muskamaso. Come discover for yourself what ethical space is, what an Indigenous strategy is, or what our Indigenous worldviews are. Especially if you're serving the Indigenous families, we invite you to come join us. Come walk alongside us, and we'll discover together what we might create. In the Creator's name, I remember sitting with an elder. We just lit the smudge and we were just chatting, and I said, sometimes I wonder how we got here, how we got to this place where we're able to lead with culture in a way that just resonates with us so much to the point it doesn't even feel like a job. And it isn't, because our cultural strategies, our worldviews, our practices and how we invite and meet our families is a way of life. And I think that's what's really distinct about that. And I asked that elder, I said, why does it seem when we lay down our offerings for something and it seems to unfold in an easier and natural way? And he said, listen. He goes, what do you hear? And at that time we were in one of our offices, and there was a program going on, and the kids were playing and they were laughing and running around, and you could hear the kids. And he goes, that's why. He said, the kids are our medicine. The kids are why we're all here. And we don't look at our children's needs from the way many Western constructs do. Our children you don't address child safety without the mom or the dad, without the mushum or the cookum, without the language or the cultural teachings. You don't address children's safety in isolation of those. Western mainstream systems have been doing that for generations. And that's what Miskanawah is changing. We're changing that narrative. We're changing that practice, one child at a time, one team member at a time, one organization at a time. And it's those incremental changes that'll have the kind of systems change that I think many of us hope for. So we lead with culture. We lead through our families, through our children, through our elders and our knowledge keepers, and we invite our non-Indigenous allies, our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters to walk alongside us and help us discover what that might mean, what we might create together. And ask them all. In the Creator's name, when I think about the Western concept or practice of strategic planning, I think about this shift that Miskanawah has made over particularly the course of the last 4 or 5 years. We embraced our Wakotowin teachings. We embraced the traditional tea dance ceremony, which is community consultation, which is where our strategic plan priorities come from. I think about that shift and how that shift has transformed our organization. It wasn't that long ago that we were primarily an intervention agency, but it was those ceremonies that challenged us to look at our strategies, our Western strategies, our Western strategic plan from an Indigenous worldview. And when we did that, we realized a significant disconnect. And so that challenged us to think about, okay, so who are we building relatives with? You need to start with like-minded people, people that have some common understandings, visions, and intentions. And so when we started to make that shift, we found ourselves quickly transformed over a course of 2 years from a government intervention agency to, a community early intervention prevention agency that is leading with Indigenous worldviews and Indigenous strategies. So that is the impact that our leading with culture has had on our strategic plan. Has all our strategic priorities emanate from those tea dance ceremonies, and are continually revisited, fine-tuned, adjusted through our oral truthing ceremonies that are happening basically every couple of weeks at Miskanawah. They're happening so often, sometimes I don't even know they're going on. And that to me speaks to that transfer of knowledge, to that transfer of responsibility to people stepping into Escapios. And so the strategic plan is also, our part of, we've embraced and embedded all of our Wakotoan teachings, our Miopima Tisuin, our Nagotoki, our Sidiskatawin, our Askimatsuin. We've embraced all of those cultural protocols and parallels, those teachings into our strategic plan. And that's how we move forward with that. That's how we strive to build ethical space and ensure that no matter what funder you are, no matter what community strategy that is being promoted or advocated or presented, we can speak to it through the Wakotoan lens, and how we, the ceremonies challenge us to live the plan. You call it the strategic plan, we call it our cultural mandate, our cultural practice. And it's, in the past, the strategic plan for me used to be, hire a consultant and it's a facilitated conversation, and you get this nice written booklet, and it sits on your desk. By embracing and creating our strategic plan and priorities through a Wakotoan lens, it becomes a living document that no matter who you are at Miskanawah, you have some connection and understanding and some responsibility to it. So when you utilize those Indigenous worldviews, those Indigenous cultural values, those are at the heart of how we protect the smudge. And our elders continually challenge us in what that looks like, how that translates into practice. But protecting the smudge is our cultural mandate, and is basically the compass to ensuring that our strategic priorities are embedding and leading with cultural worldviews.
Part of the Wakotoan Old Camp was to recruit alliances along the way, so that we can help grow with each other. And that's why when we look at United Way is part of our camp, because we're also supplying resources to them so they can keep growing. So they, in return, they're supplying resources for us to keep going. And that's part of the old Wakotoan camp, the old way of harvesting resources and knowledge so that we can keep moving forward. So when they started moving into the present camp, they carried some of that knowledge and brought it to the present camp. And it grew. It just blossomed because of that connection we have with our oral teachings. But we also knew that it had a spirit, that we had to feed it in order for us to continue moving forward. Yeah. And that's why we created an alliance with different agencies, different organizations. Then you look at United Way, they are our relations. So we need to keep that relationship going. They support us, we support them. So it works both ways. Yeah. And they understand that. They understand that part, that relationship part. Because every time we sit around, Miskanawah comes up. And I sit there and I say, oh, okay. But they will always ask, how do you guys do that? And I said, well, we do it. We go back and harvest whatever knowledge that's missing today so it can help us move forward. Yeah. Teamwork, collaboration, collective consciousness is reinforced. It doesn't only become you, it becomes everybody.